The galaxy was vast and full of light, but fear spread quickly across its many stars. The Valorian fleet had returned, and every world that heard the news trembled. The Valorians were not like other alien races. They were ruthless, organized, and had destroyed entire civilizations without mercy. Their ships were enormous, covered in black armor that reflected no light, and their weapons were strong enough to melt the surface of a planet. Whenever they appeared, silence followed, because everyone knew what would happen next. No fleet had ever defeated them, and no army had ever slowed them down. The first sign of their return came from the Kelros system, a place known for its peaceful trade stations. Merchants from dozens of species lived there, selling food, minerals, and technology. One night, without warning, the Valorians entered the system. Their fleet spread out like a dark shadow, blocking the sun from the stations below. In less than an hour, the stations were destroyed, and the survivors who tried to escape were hunted down. The Kelros system went silent. The news spread across the galaxy, and panic followed in every direction. The Galactic Council met in the capital world of Aranon soon after. The council was made up of leaders from the strongest and oldest civilizations. The great hall where they gathered was carved into a massive crystal mountain, with lights shining down from the high ceiling. But even in this shining place, the mood was heavy. Everyone could feel the fear in the air. Each leader remembered how their ancestors had spoken of the Valorians, how they left nothing but ruin behind them. The council leader, a tall creature with silver scales, spoke with a heavy voice. The Valorian fleet has shaken the galaxy once again. Kelros is gone. If we do nothing, they will move from system to system until no one is left. But who among us has the courage to stop them? No one answered at first. The leaders looked at one another, their faces showing shame and fear. The Aranorians had ships, but they remembered the Battle of Solith, where their fleets had been broken. The Ceruleans had strong armies, but their weapons had failed against Valorian armor. Even the proud Dravarians, known for their warlike nature, remained silent. Everyone had seen what happened to those who tried to stand against the Dark Fleet in the far corner of the council chamber. A smaller delegation sat quietly. They were human, representatives from Earth, a world that had only joined the council recently. To most of the older civilizations, humans were still considered new, inexperienced, and untested. The galaxy had seen them as reckless explorers who spoke boldly but had little true power. No one expected them to stand up in a moment like this, as silence continued to fill the hall. The stories of the Kelros survivors reached the council. Witnesses spoke of massive ships with rows of glowing weapons, and how the Valorians hunted down every escape craft with cruel precision. The images were broadcast across the galaxy, and entire populations began preparing to flee. Fear was turning into despair, and despair was quickly turning into surrender. Yet whispers began to move among the people. Whispers of Earth. The humans had survived wars of their own, wars that had nearly destroyed them, but had also made them stronger. The humans had built weapons designed not only to defend, but to adapt. They had a history of fighting against impossible odds. Other species remembered how Earth had once stood alone against invaders on their homeworld, refusing to give in even when defeat seemed certain. The whispers grew into questions. If anyone could stand against the Valorians, could it be the humans? In the council hall, the silence was finally broken. The human representative, Commander Daniel Cross, stood and spoke in a calm voice. His words carried across the chamber. The galaxy fears this fleet because it has never faced an enemy that refused to fall. Humanity has faced such battles before we know what it means to fight until there is nothing left. If the council cannot act, then Earth will. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Many of the alien leaders whispered to one another, shocked at the boldness of the humans' words. Some laughed quietly, thinking the humans were arrogant. Others frowned, remembering the courage in their own ancestors before fear had taken hold. For the first time in many years, there was a spark of hope, even if it was small. The Valorian fleet had indeed shaken the galaxy, but something new was stirring. The galaxy watched and waited, wondering if Earth truly had the strength to face the nightmare that had returned. For the first time, the shadow of fear was met not with silence, but with defiance. And in the hearts of many, a single thought began to grow. Perhaps the humans would not only fight, perhaps they would lead. The news of Commander Daniel crosses. Word spread quickly through the Council and across the galaxy. Many species laughed at the thought of humans standing against the Valorian fleet. To them, Earth was still young, still new to the stars, and untested in the kind of war that shook empires. But there were others who listened closely. They remembered how humanity had risen quickly, building colonies, ships, and alliances in only a short span of time. There was something about the way humans carried themselves, something different from the older races who had grown weary of endless fear. The council chambers remained tense after Daniel's speech. The leader of the Dravarians, a broad-shouldered, tortured figure with sharp bone ridges across his face, leaned forward. "Your words are strong, human. But words do not fight fleets. What does Earth truly have to offer? What army can you bring that the rest of us cannot?" Daniel looked around the chamber before speaking. "What Earth offers is not only ships and weapons, 'tis will. It is the promise that we do not run when death comes. We fight until the last breath. That is something the Valorians cannot break." At his side stood Laura Mitchell, the human diplomat sent with him. She stepped forward now, her calm voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "We understand your fear. The Valorians have crushed every fleet they have faced, but they have never faced us. Humanity does not measure victory only by survival. We measure it by what we stand for. If we must die, we die fighting. And that spirit is why we will not fall." Some of the council members muttered in disbelief, but others fell silent, unable to deny the power in her words. Fear had kept them from acting, but these humans, so small compared to the towering alien leaders, spoke with a strength that felt unshakable. Still, the council leader with the silver scales shook his head. "The galaxy is tired of war. We will not risk another mass slaughter. If Earth wishes to stand, you will stand alone." Daniel nodded slowly. He had expected this. Humans had always known that if they wanted to survive, they could not wait for others to protect them. Earth's history was filled with moments when they had stood alone against impossible odds and somehow endured. This would be no different. When the meeting ended, messages traveled through the stars. Many species still thought the humans foolish, but some began to wonder. Could this small, determined race truly do what no one else could? Could they fight the nightmare and win? Back on Earth, preparations had already begun. In the great shipyards orbiting the planet, workers rushed to finish the construction of warships. Massive carriers, sleek destroyers, and heavy cruisers formed lines across the black sky. But ships alone were not the true strength of Earth. What made the difference was the army they carried. Admiral Charcoal stood on the deck of the flagship, as new recruits and veteran soldiers marched in formation below. He had seen many battles before, but even he knew this would be unlike any other. The Valorians were not just another enemy. They were a storm that swept away everything in their path. But Cole also knew his people. Humanity had been tempered by centuries of conflict on their own world. They had fought wars for survival, rebuilt from ashes, and learned to adapt faster than anyone else. Among the soldiers preparing for battle was Captain Ethan Ward. He had grown up listening to stories of Earth's wars, of men and women who had refused to give up, no matter how dark the times became. To him, this fight was not just about defending Earth, but proving to the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. Beside him trained Lieutenant Grace Miller, a skilled pilot known for her quick thinking and fearless maneuvers. She often joked that humans were reckless by nature, but in war, that recklessness became an edge. Together, they watched as the Iron Legion, the name given to Earth's assembled force, took shape. It was more than a fleet. It was a symbol. The soldiers were not only trained to follow orders, but to think, to adapt, and to turn any weakness of the enemy into an advantage. Where other armies moved like machines, humanity's army moved like a living storm across the galaxy. News channels showed images of Earth's preparations. Some mocked it, saying the humans were charging to their deaths. Others felt a spark of hope they had not felt in generations. The Valorians had always been feared because no one had dared to face them with full force. Now, humanity was about to do exactly that. Asterisk. In the darkness of space, the Valorian fleet moved closer, their black ships spreading across star systems like a shadow. Entire populations fled before them. And yet, far away, the Iron Legion was gathering. For the first time, the Valorians would not face broken fleets or frightened worlds. They would face an army that had no intention of surrendering. Daniel Cross watched the preparations from the Council's observation deck. He knew many still doubted them, but doubt did not matter. What mattered was that Earth would fight. Humanity had made its choice, and soon the galaxy would see what that choice meant. The galaxy trembled before the Valorian fleet. But now, for the first time, there was another force moving to meet them. Humanity had stepped forward, and the war for the stars was about to begin. Asterisk, the Iron Legion was no longer a plan on paper. It had become real, and it stretched across the dark sky above Earth like a wall of steel. Dozens of massive carriers drifted in orbit, their lights glowing faintly against the stars. Sleek destroyers patrolled between them, and heavy cruisers floated like giants waiting for battle. To the people of Earth, it was a sight both terrifying and inspiring. For the first time in history, all of humanity's strength had gathered in one place, ready to face the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. Admiral Richard Cole stood on the command bridge of the flagship, the Valor, watching the fleet assemble. His face was lined with years of war, but his eyes were sharp and steady. He had fought many battles before, but this one was different. He knew that what happened next would decide not only the future of Earth, but the future of countless other worlds around him. Officers reported ship readiness, weapon checks, and final supply loads. Everything was moving into place. On the lower decks, soldiers trained without rest. Captain Ethan Ward led his unit through drills, his voice firm as he barked orders. He had always believed that discipline would be the key to survival. His men and women responded quickly, their movements sharp and precise. But Ethan also knew that discipline alone was not enough. What set humans apart was their ability to think differently in the middle of chaos. He reminded his unit of this every day. The enemy will expect us to fight like machines, he told them. But we are not machines. We are human, and that is our strength. Lieutenant Grace Miller prepared in her own way. She was a pilot, one of the best in the fleet. Her fighter squadron, known as the Hawks, was famous for daring maneuvers that no other species would even attempt. Grace often said that humans were reckless, but that recklessness was the reason they won battles others would have lost. She sat in her fighter's cockpit, running through the systems, but in her mind, she was already flying through enemy fire, weaving between blasts, and striking where the Valorians least expected it. The soldiers and pilots were not the only ones preparing. Earth's engineers worked day and night to ready the new technology that would give the Iron Legion its edge. They had designed autonomous drone fleets that could act as both shields and weapons. They had built rail cannons capable of punching through the thickest armor. They had created communication systems that allowed entire fleets to react as one body, moving faster and smarter than any enemy had seen before. But none of these tools would matter without the will to use them. And humanity's will was strong in the council chambers far away. Alien leaders watched the reports. Many still doubted. The Ceruleans whispered that the humans were building their own funeral fleet. The Aranorians muttered that Earth would only anger the Valorians further and bring greater destruction. But some of the younger civilizations, those who had suffered most under the shadow of the Valorians, began to hope. They saw something in the humans that reminded them of how their own people once fought. Before fear had silenced them, Admiral Cole addressed the fleet through every screen and speaker. His voice carried to soldiers in the training halls, to pilots in their cockpits, and to engineers in the shipyards. "We are the Iron Legion," he said. "We are not just fighting for Earth. We are fighting for every world that has fallen. To the Valorians, and for every world that still lives in fear. We do not run, we do not bow. We stand, and we fight." His words brought silence, then a rising cheer that echoed across the ships. It was not the cheer of blind hope, but of determination, of men and women who knew the danger and still chose to face it. Captain Ethan Ward walked through the barracks after the speech. He saw fear in the eyes of some soldiers, but he also saw resolve. He placed a hand on the shoulder of one young recruit and said quietly, "Courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is doing your duty in spite of it." The recruit nodded, straightened his back, and returned to his training. Meanwhile, Grace Miller looked at the stars from her fighter bay. She thought about the other worlds that had already fallen, about the Kelrose system that had been wiped out. She whispered to herself, "This time, they'll face someone who doesn't break." The Iron Legion continued to grow, and with each passing day, more ships became ready. Soon, the fleet would leave Earth's orbit and head toward the outer colonies, where the Valorians had already begun their advance. The soldiers knew that many of them might not return, but none of them wavered. They were part of something larger than themselves. In the darkness of space, the Valorian fleet spread like a storm cloud, preparing to sweep across another system. But this time, they would not be unchallenged. Far away, a deadly army was rising, forged not only of steel and fire, but of human spirit. The galaxy had doubted them, the council had dismissed them, but soon all would see. Humanity was coming. And when they arrived, the galaxy would never be the same again. The Iron Legion moved through the stars like a wave of steel. Their destination was the outer colony of Theron, a system already marked by the Valorian fleet as their next target. For days, the people of Theron had lived in fear, watching the black ships gather at the edge of their skies. The Valorians were patient, striking only when their prey was fully surrounded. But this time, they would not have the chance. Humanity's army was coming to meet them. Admiral Richard Cole stood at the command center of the Valor, his eyes fixed on the glowing tactical map. Red marks showed the Valorian fleet spread wide across the system like claws closing in. Blue marks represented the Iron Legion, now moving into position. His voice was steady as he gave orders. "All ships hold formation. We will strike when the enemy commits to the colony. We take their strength and turn it against them." In the hangars, Captain Ethan Ward prepared his unit for battle. He checked every weapon and armor plate himself, moving among his soldiers like a steady anchor. He could see the fear in their faces, but also the determination. They all knew this was not just another fight. This was history being written in fire and blood. He gathered them together and spoke. "The Valorians believe they cannot be defeated. Today, we show them they are wrong. Stay sharp, watch each other's backs, and remember what we are fighting for." In another part of the fleet, Lieutenant Grace Miller climbed into her fighter. The Hawks were already seated in their cockpits, waiting for the signal. Grace felt her heart beat faster as she looked out through the glass canopy at the stars. Beyond, she had flown many battles, but never against an enemy like this. Still, her smile was sharp. She loved the challenge, and she trusted her instincts. "Stay with me," she said, over the comms. "We fly smart, we fly fast, and we don't. Give them the fight they expect." The Valorians made the first move. Their fleet surged forward, lines of black ships sweeping toward Theron's main colony. The planet below lit up with warning sirens as civilians fled into shelters. On the Valor, alarms echoed across the decks. "Enemy fleet incoming," an officer reported. Admiral Cole raised his hand. "All ships, engage." The Iron Legion moved as one. Carriers released swarms of drones that filled the space between the fleets, while cruisers fired massive rail cannons that cut through the black destroyers darted forward, unleashing volleys of missiles that tracked enemy ships. The first clash came in a storm of light and fire. Explosions flared across the dark, and the silence of space was broken by the fury of war. Grace and her Hawks tore into the battle. Weaving between enemy blasts with reckless precision, she pushed her fighter to its limits, diving straight through a wall of plasma fire to strike the belly of a Valorian cruiser. Her missiles hit true, ripping open the enemy's armor. "That's how we do it," she shouted, pulling away before the ship exploded. Her squadron cheered, their voices sharp with adrenaline. On the Valor, Cole watched carefully. The Valorians fought with brutal strength but little flexibility. Their formations were rigid, their tactics predictable. Humanity's greatest weapon was adaptability, and Cole used it well. He shifted ships rapidly, changing patterns before the enemy could adjust. Every time the Valorians pushed, the Legion bent just enough to strike back harder. Ethan Ward's moment came when a Valorian boarding ship latched on to one of the cruisers. He and his unit stormed the corridors, meeting the invaders head-on. The fighting was fierce. Blades against rifles, armored soldiers against towering aliens. Ethan fought at the front, his rifle blazing, his voice calling orders above the chaos. Hold the line. Drive them back. Step by step, his unit forced the Valorians into retreat, finally blasting the boarding ship free from the cruiser's hull. His men cheered, their victory small but vital in the larger storm. Still, the battle was far from easy. The Valorians unleashed their heaviest ships, dreadnoughts armed with weapons capable of cutting through entire formations. The legions staggered under the assault. 2 destroyers were lost, their remains drifting in the void. A carrier's hangar was torn apart, scattering fighters into chaos. For a moment, it seemed the enemy's strength might finally overwhelm them, but Cole was ready. He ordered the drone fleets into a dense wall, absorbing the worst of the fire. Behind that shield, the cruisers fired in perfect unison at the dreadnought's exposed side. The blasts tore into its armor, and Grace led her squadron into the opening, diving close to unleash a final strike. The dreadnought burned, shattering under the combined force. Across the galaxy, eyes watched the battle through Council transmissions. Worlds that had once believed the Valorians could not be stopped now saw something new. They saw humans fighting with fire in their hearts, turning fear into strength, and breaking through walls that no one else had ever dared to challenge. When the Valorians finally pulled back, their lines broken, the people of Theron erupted in relief. Humanity had done what no one thought possible. They had stood against the fleet, and the fleet had blinked. The Iron Legion gathered their wounded, repaired their ships, and prepared for the next strike. This was only the beginning, but it was enough to prove one truth. The galaxy had trembled at the shadow of the Valorians. Now, for the first time, the Valorians trembled too. The victory at Theron shook the galaxy in ways no one had expected. For the first time in living memory, the Valorian fleet had been forced to retreat. The images of burning dreadnoughts and broken enemy ships spread like wildfire across every channel. On distant worlds, people gathered in city squares to watch. The recordings, their voices rising in disbelief and hope. The Valorians, who had seemed untouchable, had finally been wounded. And it was humanity who had done it. But the war was far from over. The Valorians answered the defeat with fury. They began broadcasting across galactic channels, their deep voices echoing like thunder. Humans, you are nothing. You are dust. You dare to strike at us, but you cannot escape your fate. We will burn your world, and your kind will vanish into silence. The messages were filled with images of past conquests, planets stripped bare, and cities turned to ash. It was meant to break spirits and crush resistance before the next battle. On the Valor. The crew watched the broadcasts in silence. Many felt the weight of the enemy's threats, but they did not bend. Commander Daniel Cross stood before the gathered officers and spoke firmly. They want us afraid. They want us to believe we are doomed. But fear is their weapon, and it has worked. For too long, we are not the ones who should be afraid. They are. Diplomat Laura Mitchell prepared her own response. With the Council's permission, she addressed the galaxy on the same channels the Valorians had used. Her face was calm, her eyes steady as she spoke. To every world that hears me, I speak as a human. The Valorians tell you that you are powerless, but their words are lies. They want you to bow because they know what happens when you stand. At Theron, humanity stood, and the Valorians bled. We will not surrender. We will not kneel. And we invite every world that still believes in freedom to stand with us. Her words spread across the stars. On some worlds, her message was dismissed as reckless. On others, it lit a spark of courage. Civilizations that had been silent for years began to whisper about resistance. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. The thought that perhaps victory was possible. While diplomats worked with words, the soldiers of the Iron Legion prepared with steel. The fleet repaired its damaged ships and reorganized its forces. Ethan Ward's unit trained harder than ever, running combat drills through the halls of the Valor. They knew the next battle would be harder. And the Valorians would not underestimate them again. Ethan reminded his soldiers that every choice they made mattered. We've shown them what we can do, he said, but now they will throw everything at us. Our job is to remind them why they should fear us. Lieutenant Grace Miller and her squadron also prepared, running simulations of the new enemy tactics. The Valorians had learned from Theron, and their formations were shifting. Grace studied every move, imagining ways to break through the rigid patterns. They'll tighten their grip, she told her pilots. But the tighter they grip, the easier it is for us to slip through. The next clash came sooner than expected. The Valorians attacked a mining colony on the edge of human space, hoping to lure the Iron Legion into a trap. The colony was small, but thousands of civilians lived there, and abandoning them was not an option. Admiral Cole ordered the fleet forward, knowing the risk. If this is a trap, he said, then let us be the hammer that breaks it. The battle was fierce from the start. Valorian ships appeared in overwhelming numbers, more than the Legion had faced before. Their dreadnoughts fired without pause, shaking the human fleet. Missiles streaked through the void, and explosions lit the sky above the colony. For a moment, it seemed the enemy's sheer power would overwhelm them. Then Grace Miller made her move. With her hawks behind her, she dove through a gap in the enemy line, ignoring the danger. Her squadron drew fire away from the main fleet, weaving between enemy blasts like fireflies in a storm. One by one, they struck at weak points, crippling enemy destroyers and forcing the Valorians to shift their focus. Grace's daring cost her dearly. Half her squadron was lost in the maneuver, but their sacrifice gave the Legion the chance to strike back. Admiral Cole seized the opening. He ordered the fleet into a risky formation, drawing the Valorians into a narrow corridor where their numbers counted for less. Ethan Ward and his unit boarded another enemy ship during the chaos, fighting through the halls to disable its command center. His men fought with desperate strength, each step forward paid for with blood. When the ship finally went silent, the rest of the enemy line faltered. Slowly, painfully, the Iron Legion pushed the Valorians back. The mining colony was saved, though scarred, and the fleet held the field once again. But victory came at a heavy cost. Dozens of ships were damaged or lost, and many soldiers never returned. The faces of the fallen were remembered by their comrades, who knew the price of every small step forward. Yet the message was clear. The Valorians could not break humanity's will. Even when faced with overwhelming power, the Iron Legion fought on, adapting and striking in ways the enemy could not predict. Across the galaxy, the broadcasts of Laura Mitchell's speech now carried a new weight. It was no longer just words. It was proof. The Valorians had tried to crush the spirit of the galaxy with fear. Instead, their own fear was beginning to grow. The battle for the mining colony had left the Iron Legion scarred. But it had also given Admiral Richard Cole something more important than numbers. It had given him knowledge. He had seen the way. The Valorians fought the way they relied on brute strength and rigid commands. They were powerful, yes, but they lacked flexibility. They fought like a wall of stone, and Cole knew that even stone could be broken if struck in the right place. On the Valar, Cole gathered his commanders. Daniel Cross, Laura Mitchell, Captain Ethan Ward, Koo, and Lieutenant Grace Miller all stood with him around the glowing star map. Enemy positions blinked red, spreading across human colonies like an infection. Blue marks showed the Iron Legion, smaller in number, but moving like a living wave. Cole's voice was calm but strong. We cannot match their size. We cannot match their firepower, but we do not need to. We will fight them where they are weakest, and we will turn their strength into their downfall. Laura listened carefully. She was not a soldier, but she understood strategy in her own way. Their pride blinds them, she said softly. They believe no one can outthink them. That is why they will never expect what comes next. Cole nodded. Exactly. We strike not with numbers, but with speed and deception. The plan was bold. The Iron Legion would not meet the Valorians in simple head-on battles. Instead, they would use their drone fleets and smaller ships to bait the enemy into traps. They would split enemy formations, isolate their dreadnoughts, and cut supply lines that fed the massive fleet. The humans would fight like hunters in the dark, hitting fast and vanishing before the enemy could strike back. Captain Ethan Ward trained his unit for these missions. They practiced boarding drills, sabotage runs, and infiltration strikes. Each soldier learned to move like shadow and fire, slipping into enemy ships and destroying them from within. Ethan reminded them that their strength was not only in weapons, but in their minds. The Valorians will expect us to fight straight and die quickly, he told them. Instead, we will fight sideways. We will make them chase ghosts until they don't know where the real battle is. Grace Miller and the Hawks trained in new maneuvers as well. They practiced sudden reversals, sharp dives, and swarm patterns with the drones. Grace was fearless in her flying, and her squadron followed her with the same reckless courage. Big and slow, she told her pilots. We're small and fast. Think of it like a wolf pack hunting a giant. We don't take it head on, we bite until it falls. The first test of the new strategy came quickly. A Valorian fleet moved toward a human supply world, confident after sending reinforcements. Cole ordered the Legion into motion. Instead of rushing to meet the enemy directly, the humans deployed their drones in scattered groups. The drones lit up as they launched false signals, appearing larger and stronger than they truly were. The Valorians took the bait, spreading their ships wide to crush the supposed enemy. That was when Grace and her hawks dove in, striking at the gaps left behind, while the fighters tore into the distracted enemy. Ethan and his unit boarded a cruiser on the edge of the fight. Moving like shadows through the corridors, they planted charges and sabotaged engines. When the cruiser exploded, the Valorian line broke apart, their own formations now a trap against themselves. Cole's fleet surged in from hiding, cutting into the chaos with precise strikes. Within hours, the mighty enemy formation was shattered, and the humans slipped away before reinforcements could arrive. Across the galaxy, the battle reports spread. The Iron Legion was not only winning, they were outthinking the unbeatable. Stories of humans striking from nowhere, vanishing into the stars, and returning again like storms filled the channels. The Valorians, who had once been feared for their certainty, now found themselves confused and enraged in the council chambers. Alien leaders who had doubted humanity now leaned forward in interest. Some who had mocked Earth began to reconsider. Others, still fearful, muttered that the humans were only delaying the inevitable. But no one could deny it anymore. Humanity had found a way to stand. Laura Mitchell gave another speech, this time broadcast to allies across the stars. We are not fighting to be heroes. We are fighting because we must. But no, the Valorians can be defeated. They are not gods. They are not unbreakable. They bleed and they break. If we fight together, we can end their reign of fear. Her words reached colonies hiding in the dark, soldiers who thought no hope remained, and leaders too afraid to raise their voices. Slowly, the galaxy began to stir. But the Valorians did not retreat quietly. Their commanders grew more ruthless, more determined to crush humanity once and for all. They began to gather their largest weapon, a super dreadnought that dwarfed every ship in the Iron Legion. It was said to be capable of burning entire planets in a single strike. It moved slowly through the stars, a giant heading toward the warfront. On the Valar, Admiral Cole studied the reports. His face was stern, but his voice carried calm. "They are bringing their greatest weapon," he said. "Good. Let them come. We will show them that size is nothing against will and strategy." The Iron Legion continued to sharpen itself, each battle making them stronger, faster, and more united. The galaxy now watched with bated breath, knowing that the next clash would decide far more than a single system. Humanity had proven itself deadly. Now, they would be tested against the greatest challenge of all. The super dreadnought moved through space like a mountain with engines. Its size dwarfed anything humanity had ever seen before. Entire fleets had been destroyed by its weapons in the past, and now it was heading directly toward the human colonies. Across the galaxy, fear spread like fire. If this ship could not be stopped, then everything humanity had fought for would be lost. Admiral Richard Cole stood on the bridge of the Valar, staring at the massive display of the enemy ship. Around him, his commanders watched in silence. Daniel Cross leaned forward, his jaw tight. "We can't fight that thing head-on," he said. "Its firepower will tear us apart before we even get close." Laura Mitchell, calm but worried, spoke softly. "But if we run, the galaxy will believe it cannot be beaten. Then no one will stand with us." Cole nodded. He knew she was right. The Iron Legion had grown stronger with each victory, but this was the test that would decide everything. They had to fight. They had to prove that even a giant could fall. Grace Miller, the fearless pilot, stood with her flight helmet under her arm. "Then let's cut it down piece by piece," she said. That monster may be big, but it's not invincible. Nothing is. Cole turned to his commanders. We cannot destroy it with raw strength. But it is not just a weapon. It is a machine. Machines have weaknesses. We will find them, and we will strike until it cannot stand. The plan was daring. The Iron Legion would not try to face the dreadnought in open fire. Instead, they would distract it with drones and small fleets, keeping its massive guns busy. And the Hawks would dive close, weaving between its defenses, looking for weak spots. Ethan Ward and his unit would attempt the impossible, boarding the dreadnought itself to strike from inside. As the fleet prepared, Laura spoke to the soldiers over the comms. Her voice carried hope. This is the moment the galaxy will remember. Not for the size of our ships, but for the courage in our hearts. We do not fight because we believe we cannot fall. We fight because we believe we can rise again, no matter the cost. The battle began with fire. The dreadnought's cannons lit the stars, tearing apart drones and decoy ships. Explosions shook the void, but the Iron Legion did not retreat. They moved like a swarm, darting and twisting, never staying still long enough to be destroyed. Grace led the Hawks in a daring run, flying so close to the dreadnought's surface that its guns could not track them. Laser fire flashed past, but the small fighters held together, biting at the giant like wasps. On the Valar, Cole watched every movement. He gave no loud orders, only calm commands. Shift left. Hold the line. Keep their eyes on the drones. His mind worked like a chess player, always thinking 2 steps ahead. Then Ethan Ward's unit launched. Their transport darted through the chaos, slammed by debris and fire, but still it reached the dreadnought's side. The soldiers cut into the hull, entering the beast itself. Inside, they moved through endless dark corridors filled with smoke and fire. Valorian guards attacked, but the humans fought with sharp precision. Every hallway became a struggle. Every step forward a victory. Grace's voice came over the comms. We found weak points in the armor, sending coordinates. Cole acted at once, redirecting fire to those spots. The dreadnought shuddered as blasts tore into its massive structure. It was still alive, still deadly, but now it bled. Inside, Ethan and his soldiers reached the engine core. It was enormous, glowing with raw power. The soldiers planted charges, but enemy reinforcements poured in. A brutal firefight broke out, humans against towering aliens. Ethan shouted, "Hold them. Just a little longer." Outside, the dreadnought unleashed a beam of fire that cut through space, destroying entire wings of drones. The Valar shook as shockwaves hit, but Cole stood firm. "Stay on them," he ordered. "Do not give them time to recover." Laura watched him, her heart pounding. She knew this was the razor's edge, one mistake, and they would all fall. Yet she also felt something stronger than fear. She believed in them. She believed in humanity. Inside the dreadnought, Ethan's team was down to half its number. Still, they held the line. With a final push, they armed the charges. Ethan's voice came through, rough but steady. "Admiral, it's done. Get clear." Cole did not hesitate. All ships pulled back. The Iron Legion shifted into retreat, drawing enemy fire as the soldiers inside fought their last stand. Moments later, light burst from the heart of the dreadnought. The charges ignited, and the giant tore apart from within. Fire ripped through its frame, splitting metal and shattering its core. The massive ship that had once seemed unstoppable became a graveyard of burning fragments. The galaxy watched as the monster fell. For the first time in history, the Valorians' greatest weapon had been destroyed. Cheers erupted across the comms. Soldiers shouting in triumph, pilots crying with relief. Grace's voice came through, half laughter, half tears. We did it. We actually did it. On the Valar, Cole let out a long breath. His face was still stern, but his eyes held a rare fire. This is not the end, he said quietly. But it is the beginning of their downfall. Laura stood beside him, her voice soft but full of pride. The galaxy will never forget this day. They thought one fleet could make us tremble. But we brought an army, and we brought our will, and that is stronger than fear. The Iron Legion had faced the greatest threat of all, and survived. The war was not over, but humanity had proven that even the strongest enemy could fall. And with that proof, the galaxy began to hope again. Asterisk. The galaxy had gone silent after the fall of the super dreadnought. The wreckage floated in the endless void, burning slowly as if the stars themselves had claimed victory. Across human colonies and even on distant alien worlds, messages of hope spread. For the first time in years, people believed the Valorians could be defeated. But the leaders of the Iron Legion knew it was not the end. The enemy was wounded, but not broken. Admiral Richard Cole stood on the command deck of the Valar, his eyes on the star map before him. Small red markers showed the enemy fleets still scattered across the galaxy. They were regrouping, waiting for orders from what was left of their high command. Daniel Cross leaned against the railing beside him, his face serious. "They won't take this defeat quietly," Daniel said. "The Valorians will come back with more. They'll want revenge." Cole nodded slowly. "Yes, they will. But this time, the galaxy knows they can be beaten. And that is a weapon more powerful than any fleet." Laura Mitchell walked over, carrying new reports. Her calm voice filled the room. "The colonies are sending reinforcements. Even worlds that stayed silent before are offering their fleets. They see what we've done, and they want to stand with us now." A faint smile touched Cole's lips. It was not often he allowed himself such moments. "Then humanity is no longer alone," he said. Grace Miller, the fearless pilot, entered the room, still in her flight gear. She looked tired, her face pale from days of fighting, but her eyes burned with determination. "The Hawks are ready," she said. "Whatever comes next, we'll fly." Ethan Ward's name was spoken with silence. He and his soldiers had never made it back from the dreadnought. Their sacrifice had saved them all, and every member of the Iron Legion carried that weight in their hearts. On the bridge, Cole stood, straighter, as if carrying Ethan's memory with him. "He gave us this chance," Cole said firmly. "We will not waste it." The War Council gathered soon after. Commanders from human colonies and allied worlds appeared as holograms around the table. Some were cautious, some eager, but all of them were watching humanity now. A voice from one of the alien leaders spoke. "Your army has done what none of us believed possible. You destroyed the weapon that crushed entire systems. Now you lead." For a moment, silence filled the chamber. Cole did not smile. He did not raise his voice. He simply said, "Then we will lead together. No world will stand alone again. We fight as one, or we fall as many." The decision was made. The Iron Legion would not only defend, they would strike back. A grand campaign was planned, one that would push deep into enemy space and cut the Valorians off from their core worlds. It was a plan born of courage, but also of desperation. They had to move now, before the enemy built another weapon. The following days were filled with preparation. Fleets gathered from across human colonies. Shipyards worked day and night to repair battle damage. Drones were built, weapons forged, and strategies written. Soldiers trained harder than ever, inspired by the victory, but aware of the cost. Grace flew patrols with her squadron, testing new flight routes and keeping the skies clear. Laura worked with leaders, calming their fears and building trust. Daniel spent hours planning each possible move the enemy could make. And Cole remained at the center, silent and steady, the anchor that held them all together. At night, when the stars were quiet, some of them thought of home. Grace thought of the wide fields where she grew up, the open skies that had first taught her to fly. Laura thought of her family on Earth, who still waited for her safe return. Cole rarely spoke of his past, but he too thought of Earth and of the people who looked to him now for hope. These thoughts did not weaken them. They made them stronger. The day of departure came. The Iron Legion, larger than ever before, gathered in formation. Hundreds of ships stretched across the void, their engines glowing like a wall of fire. 4. The first time the galaxy saw not just a human fleet, but an army that carried the will of many worlds. Cole's voice went out across the comms, calm but powerful. This is not a war for Earth alone. This is a war for freedom. They believed one fleet could make us bow. But we have risen. We have fought. And today, we march together. The galaxy will no longer tremble in fear. It will stand in defiance. The fleet moved forward, engines roaring like thunder. The galaxy that had once looked on humanity with doubt now watched with hope. Soldiers, whispered the names of the fallen, promising to honor them. Pilots tightened their grips on their controls, ready for what lay ahead. Leaders who had once hidden in silence now prepared to fight side by side as the stars stretched before them. Grace spoke softly over the comms, more to herself than anyone else. We've come this far. We won't stop now. The Valor led the way, its hull scarred but unbroken. Behind it, the Iron Legion followed, a tide of fire and steel. The galaxy knew that the war was far from over. The Valorians still waited, dangerous and cunning. But now, they faced something they had never faced before. A united force, born from courage, sacrifice, and the will to endure. And as the Iron Legion advanced into the unknown, one truth echoed across every world and every ship. One fleet had once made the galaxy tremble. But humanity had arrived with an army, and that army carried something greater than fear. It carried hope. The story of the war was not finished. But this was the moment it truly began. Asterisk.